According to the Indian tradition of Vastu Shastra, one can place in a bowl salt and cloves to purify the home and to bring good luck. As we have come to know on this channel, mythology, folklore, and religious practices attributed spirituality and metaphysical concepts to things that are directly antifungal and antimicrobial. Salt, of course, being the single most important substance to humans, and cloves being one of the strongest antimicrobial and antifungal herbs on the planet. Salt in every part of the world has been used to cleanse evil spirits, to increase your fortune and luck, and to make your life more spiritual. In the Old Testament, it is a sign of God's covenant. Jesus called his apostles the salt of the earth. In Christianity, salt can be used in baptism to consecrate an altar and to bless holy water. It's optional to add salt to holy water, but we can see it's a continuation of a long line of salt use in religious or spiritual purposes. Up until the modern era, salt's extraction was extremely labor-intensive, and it was also the most important resource to have, so much so that the Romans would be paid in salt rather than in gold. This is one of the most famous salt mines in archaeology. It was in use from the 13th to the 20th century in Poland. When humans transitioned from hunter-gatherers to farmers, they followed animal tracks to locations of salt, and this is where they built their first civilizations. As I said earlier, salt was used to purify the home, to cleanse evil spirits, to protect against witchcraft, as an offering to the gods. Salt is featured in many creation myths, such as the Norse and the Sumerian myths. In recent news, this mask was found in Bulgaria in one of the oldest salt production sites in Europe, dating back some 7,000 years old. It's believed to represent some sort of salt god or goddess. There are salt gods from every religion, from the Americas to Japan. Salt is essential for every nerve in the body, and is required for the transmission of nerve impulses. Without salt in the body and your home, the amount of evil spirits increases, aka microorganisms. Prior to refrigeration, this is how food was preserved, and this is why the ocean is so healing, or salt baths, or sea salt is so beneficial. Microorganisms, especially fungus, can't grow on salt. In modern times, salt is considered one of the deadliest ingredients in the U.S. food supply. The FDA warns that we overconsume salt and that it raises blood pressure, except there's no actual studies that salt is bad for the blood pressure or the heart. This idea came from a scientist in the 70s who gave a rat the human equivalent of 500 grams of salt a day and saw its blood pressure rise. We consume about 8 grams of salt a day, but they rolled with that information ever since and never fully revisited it. But most of the sodium we do get is from processed foods, and not actual sea salt containing minerals most humans are deficient in. Salt is the most important substance of spirituality, and spirituality is simply the microscopic processes of life. A good way to add salt into your diet is to take a hot glass of water, add a pinch of salt, and squeeze some lemon or lime juice in it. Humans don't produce their own salt, so we need to ingest it. Humans also don't produce their own vitamin C, which is essential for the immune system. Salt helps the absorption and retention of vitamin C. It's important to use the salt with lots of minerals like Celtic salt or Dead Sea salt because most people are deficient in minerals. Other than its extremely high salinity and mineral content, the Dead Sea was also known for another resource called bitumen or asphalt. Bitumen is a deep purple material that rises from the Dead Sea. It comes from organic sediment that was buried under millions of years ago. It slowly cooks in the heat and rises to the top. This was a prized resource in the ancient world. It was used as medicine for all kinds of ailments. The Egyptians used it in the mummification process, and it was used as a sealant in boats. Even Noah used it in his ark. Bitumen is solid at room temperature and melts at about 110 degrees. Yet if burned, the asphalt will release noxious gases. Because of its melting and cooling points, it was used as an adhesive for buildings, and it was mentioned in the Tower of Babel that it was constructed with this asphalt. It's possible that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were located next to the Dead Sea, were destroyed when fire caught in their building material, which was the bitumen. It had a low melting point, and this allowed the fires to spread, and the high sulfur content released all these deadly gases. Pliny the Elder wrote about how bitumen could only be broken up and used by menstrual blood. Because of this association with menstrual blood, the bitumen itself was seen as the sort of menses of the earth. The shores of the Dead Sea are also the lowest point of land of elevation on the earth, some 430 meters below sea level. The Dead Sea is rapidly drying up, and it's leaving behind these crystalline structures of salt. It's largely being blamed on the freshwater sources being diverted for drinking and irrigation, and the over-harvesting of its resources. In another part of the world is a very cool salt mine that was important to pre-Columbian cultures. In the 1950s, a cathedral was carved into this ancient salt mine. It's about 200 meters underground and is an architectural marvel. Salt will always be closely tied to religion and spirituality. In 2700 BC in China, one of the oldest treatises on pharmacology was written, and it's mostly about salt. Ernest Jones was one of the early psychoanalysts along with Freud and Jung. In an essay called The Symbolic Significance of Salt in Folklore and Superstition, he says that it has been invested with a significance far exceeding that inherent in its natural properties. Homer calls it a divine substance, Plato describes it as especially near to the gods, and we shall presently note the importance attached to it in religious ceremonies, covenants, and magical charms.